Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to UMedTV. My name is Kemal Erkan, your host for today. We have our special guest on our political series, Kyle Evans. Kay is going to be with us. She's currently one of our state officials in the state Senate, and she is running for lieutenant governor position in Delaware. Kyle, how are you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being with us. So this channel started in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic, and initially our goal was to keep in touch with our patients, to give them another resource, and we start doing a lot of different things. First, a lot of updates on COVID, but then we start doing clinical presentations, and we keep doing them. And now it turned into a really kind of like a solid program, solid channel for our local setup here. And because we are in healthcare, and because we believe our policymakers are part of what we do, and they're extremely important to make sure that they understand what we go through. From United Medical ACO standpoint, I decided to include our state officials.
Great.
In fact, we had one, we were going to have you, I believe, last year, and things didn't work out. I think it was in the summer. And but since then, we had so many different people from different positions who join us. Now, our goal today is to get to know you.
Great.
So I want you to give us from the personal side and from what you are planning to do. If you can give us a background on you, and we can start getting to know you.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I so appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and speak to everyone who's involved in following. And I love that the mission is to keep people informed. So I think we strive to do that every day in the legislature, and it can be difficult. And so I appreciate the opportunity to reach people in unique ways. My name's Kyle Evans Gay. I am a state senator. I represent the 5th Senate District up here in Brandywine 100 and Claymont areas, so the northernmost Senate District. I grew up in the area and came back after undergraduate and law schools, along with my husband, who's originally from Vermont. And we've been raising our 2 children, Ellen and Alice, up here in Brandywine 100. Lived here in our current home since 2015 and been back in the area for over a decade. In that time, I was practicing law. I had worked for the Department of Justice. My first job coming back to Delaware was as a state deputy attorney general under Beau Biden's administration, and then moved to work for the courts and to work in private practice. And so in that role, I've done a various number of things, including working in corporate litigation, including helping individuals, municipalities, local governments in any number of issues, from election law to sewer cases. So one thing I like about the law is that there's always a new problem that needs to be solved. There's always an opportunity to work collaboratively. And I really dovetailed that into the work I do in the Senate because we every day speak with constituents who have ideas, who have needs, who have challenges, who have successes that we want to celebrate with them. And it is that kind of constant momentum and community building that really drives me. One of the things I'm really proud about in what we have done since 2020 is that my seat really, I think, has become a catalyst for a lot of wonderful work in the Senate. In 2020, I was part of a group of new senators who came in, 4 of us, who were able to strengthen some of the coalitions that we needed to do things like pass a minimum wage increase, pass paid family medical leave. And so I think that the work I've done in the Senate is the possibility that I see in now running statewide and running for lieutenant governor. I'm happy to talk more about that, but it's a little bit about me, and happy to answer any other questions.
So that's great. Now, you are going to go through primaries first. Like that's going to be September 2024.
Yes.
For this.
Yep.
So now, when I check the website, the official website, I don't know if they are not up to date, but I actually didn't see your name yet, and also Sherry Walker, I believe she's going to run for the lieutenant governor.
Yes.
And I didn't see her as a confirmed candidate there. Is there a delay there, or is it are there some other issues?
So I'm just going to flag real quick. This sounds a little bit odd on my end, but I can still understand you, which is great. And I apologize if my sound isn't working. But right now, candidates are announced. They've stated their intention to run. And fairly shortly, we're expecting the Department of Elections and the party to be ready to accept those filed candidates. And so that deadline, that opportunity is just approaching, and candidates will have an opportunity to file and be presented there on the website.
Second, we have a little bit technical issue at the division, so we're going to take this off. Are you able to hear me? Okay, so I just got a feedback from one of our people saying that the sound is kind of static. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. It is a little static though. Yes.
Oh, all right. So, and you know, every once in a while we have some technical issues, but if you're not able to hear me, just please let me know. So, going back to the candidates, on the official website, I still didn't see your name as of yesterday. So you think that's going to be updated?
So candidates haven't yet had the opportunity to officially file their candidacy for that office with the Department of Elections. So as soon as that opportunity is made available, I'm certain that you'll see declared candidates going through that official process to be reflected on the internet.
And that's probably true for Sherry Walker. She's not confirmed yet, but I think she's coming on 10/27. Now, I do ask this question to the other candidates if they are going to run for the primaries. There's always a challenge with the primaries because you are running someone against someone from your own party. And you can probably get to a point where disagreements cannot be, maybe should be controlled or maybe not, but you still have to win at the end of the day. So how do you plan to overcome that issue? Competing against someone who's from your own party but you have to win.
So any election is about speaking to voters and listening to voters. And so from my perspective, a primary election, a general election, it's all about making the best case, right? I shared with you already, my background is in the law. I'm used to going to judges and juries and making a case and working with the facts and bringing out the facts. And we're going to do that this year ahead of the September 10th, 2024 primary and really talk about the issues. It's been one of the best things about running within the party, though, is that at the end of the day, you all are on the same team, working to a lot of the same goals. And I've had wonderful conversations with those candidates. And we are committed to having conversations about the issues, to running issue-based campaigns, and to elevating democratic values through the primary. I think that elections are an amazing opportunity to talk to voters. And I think that we're all going to benefit as a party from that opportunity. And I would say we have to be realistic about elections here in Delaware in this day and age. The Democratic Party has done a terrific job building the big tent and building a coalition. And that means that we have a good chance when we speak to the state at the statewide level, we have a good chance to be successful. And that means, though, that sometimes if there are nuances in how you would govern or in policy, those conversations are going to happen in a primary. While it may be not the Delaware way of the past, I don't have any problem with primaries being the Delaware way moving forward.
Sure. Now, you and I, we actually met a couple of times in the past, but we didn't have a lot of time to talk about your campaign and your other work that you did. But last time we met at the YWCA annual breakfast. As you know, United Medical and personally, I am a big supporter of YWCA, and it's a very important organization. And one of the reasons that we are also involved there is because what YWCA is able to do for those who are going through trouble in their lives and then they need immediate support, but not a permanent support. And that brings the housing issue immediately in my mind. And what they do is not a permanent placement. It's a temporary setup, which actually probably, in my opinion, is the best way to help someone throughout the crisis, and then they can get back on their own feet, and then you support them throughout that time. Now, as you know, in this election, economy is going to be extremely important, and housing is one of the issues which I do want to bring one of our videos on the third screen, and I will kind of try to explain what we have seen. Now, because we do this event on a weekly basis, almost every week, Sean Donegan and myself, we have to read a lot and we have to follow through a lot of things. And changes in economy is important for all of us. And I know our main focus from our channel standpoint is healthcare, but healthcare, as you know, is not by itself. So the social determinant of health becomes a big part of the way that we provide healthcare today. So this brings the financial issues, housing insecurities in a way, and other things together. So, for example, just from the interest rates changes, today, I think average interest rates are anywhere from 8.5 to 9%. And what it does for a $300,000 mortgage, we used to pay $1,300 versus today is $2,300. So the person who was qualified for that mortgage in 2020 with the income that they had, today they cannot. That's a huge increase, almost 75% increase on their monthly payment. And, you know, sometimes we really don't think about how much impact that could be. Like when you go from 4% to 8%, the payment that you have is going like the crazy amount, which in the example that I have. So what are the best strategies for you in Delaware for fighting the issues with financial issues and economy?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I'll use the opportunity to kind of talk about the housing space, although I think that what we do about our economy, how we grow our economy here in Delaware, is a multifaceted conversation and could be a whole 2-hour conversation. I'm happy to touch on any number of points, but I want to kind of ground the conversation and ground my comments in kind of the way that I approach governance, and perhaps the why as to why I think that running for lieutenant governor and serving in that role, being a part of the administration and a part of the cabinet, is a place where I think I can do so much good and be working with the community to tackle some of these issues. Because when it comes to these structural economic issues, it's not just what you do in far as policy, it's how you do it and how you execute it. And government is notorious for working in silos and building programs to help single problems or single sources of problems. When you talk about housing, this needs to be a whole of government approach. And I think that that can be said for any number of economic issues, including one that I've been really involved in, which is childcare and building out our early education and our K-12 education system in a way that both recruits people here because they know we have great education and keeps people here and keeps teachers here. The other thing way I like to ground this conversation is to think about the experience of my generation and why I think that younger leadership, new generations coming into our government and working within our government at higher levels is so important. My life experience is that I watched the Twin Towers fall when I was a young person in middle school, and I graduated college into a Great Recession where my financial outcomes in life were by no means guaranteed or determined. And now as I'm raising children and with my husband and families like mine, we are facing a wild economic situation with things like increasing costs, not only for childcare, but for student loans and housing. And so my generation has a very unique perspective. We don't take things for granted, and we understand that the public-private partnership has to exist and a whole of government approach is necessary in order to tackle these intransigent economic issues, which kind of takes me to the housing question, right? And you brought up YW, and I have to say, yes, they do amazing work. I was so pleased to be there and share in that wonderful day with them, and I'm grateful for your support of that organization. One key thing that I think sets YW apart from so many other places is the level of professional and self-development that they invest in their clients. And what we need to do is remember that government is about people. It is for the people and by the people. And we need to make sure that when we are looking to intervene and help individuals, that we are investing in them in particular. I'd like to call out a really interesting program that I have a lot of hopes for here in Delaware. Recently, with ARPA funds and in collaboration with the administration and with our state housing authority, I worked with them to institute what we're calling a rent reporting program. As many people know, when you pay your rent, maybe the largest payment you make every month, but it doesn't help you increase your credit score. It's not reported. And so through this pilot program, through hundreds of dollars per family only, we are looking to help families demonstrate their financial independence and success and set them up in order to be eligible to purchase a home or to take out a business loan or to get student loans, right? And so when you talk about what do we do when these economic factors are stacked against families, we help them by giving them the tools to play in that situation. I think another place that we need to look as far as the housing market, we need to obviously be working on affordable housing, and that's going to be working on density issues. That's going to be working on zoning issues, and that's going to be ensuring that we have plans that account for affordable housing as part of a housing mixture. But when you talk about individuals, there are a lot of people that we want to keep here and attract here, teachers being one of them. Why couldn't the state help teachers with their mortgage qualification? Why couldn't we provide some year or two to get people started in different ways so they can set up homes here, right? I pull these ideas out because they're ones I've heard work in other places. And what I'm looking forward to is getting down to the business of bringing people in and making sure that we have a strategic plan for housing, but that our strategic plan for housing takes into account all of the other concerns that we've been looking at with attracting families and professionals to come here and stay in Delaware.
So you mentioned education, well, you mentioned the teachers, but that kind of immediately brings me to the education. Now, because you and we never had like a long conversation in the past, so I consider myself as a Delawarean. I was 24 when I came here. I was born and raised in Turkey, and I was 24 years old, went to UD, went to Gold Beacon, started working, and never left Delaware. Now, many people who are coming from overseas, Delaware is not their number one or number two or number 10, usually probably number 60 or 75 or 100. That was my number one choice. Delaware was and still is. Part of it is because my sister and my brother-in-law, they did their schooling here. So that was kind of like the reason that I actually kind of follow them.
Yeah.
But Delaware is important for me, and I do put a lot of effort into what we can do better for Delaware. And that's one of the reasons that, again, we and the work that I do in healthcare kind of coincides with my goal of being able to help Delawareans. But when we put statistics, sometimes probably from my competitiveness, I get upset if we are not in the top 10 in the good topics. And one of them is education, unfortunately. So the education system is, especially if the kids who are not going to private schools, they're struggling. And as you mentioned, teachers may not be making enough, or that may be part of the problem. There may be some other issues, like our real estate taxes are lower. Maybe we are not supporting the state as much. What are the plans for the education where we can actually see Delaware in the top 10? Now, one of the other reasons I'm kind of thinking this way is because sometimes the science can be to our disadvantage, but in some cases it can be to our advantage, where we can actually control certain things, or we can focus on main really important topics where I feel like we can do better. And education is one of those where I believe Delaware should be in the top 10. What do you think we can do to bring Delaware in that top 10?
Well, I so appreciate that question because I'm living it right now. Like I said, I have two young girls, 4 and 6. My 6-year-old is in one of our great Delaware schools, and I am both a parent and a legislator when I walk into that building, and I wear different hats kind of depending on my reason for being there. I want to answer this education question, but I want to also just point out that your story, like mine when I came back from law school, right? We chose Delaware. And I really want to highlight that and celebrate that because so many people have such a strong attachment to Delaware because they grew up here and they're from here and their families have been here. And it is so wonderful. And I just think that we also need to celebrate everyone who's choosing to be a part of this amazing community. And I want to continue, I think, like in the same vein that you said, to make sure that we are creating a place where people want to be and will choose to be here. On education, we need to do better. My fear is that is as far as we will go, just say we need to do better. And because we have been saying we need to do better for many, many years. And our latest statistics, I think, bring it into real focus in the struggles that we had during the pandemic. Absolutely. And I don't think that it is by any ill intent of any people who have been working on this problem, because I have met those people. I've met those teachers and administrators, our Department of Education, all the way up to the governor's office, care the most about this issue. And I think one of the things is, well, why can't we get it right then? And I would say that in order to move forward from here, we are going to need to continue to support our local schools. That is the bare minimum. We need to work with them through this challenge where we have seen statistics that we wish were not the statistics that we see. I think we also need, though, to think out of the box, right? So one of the things that I have been talking about since I've been elected, and honestly before that point in time, because I was a parent experiencing it, is our early education system. And usually when I talk about early education, I talk about affordability and I talk about how it's hard to access. And I think that you know that because of your work. I think a lot of your listeners know that are experiencing that. What I want to talk about early education right now, though, is in the context of this K through 12 question. And what we know is not that early education is special. We know that kids from 0 through 3 are incredibly special. From 0 to 3 and then 0 through 5, if you extend it out a little bit longer, the brain grows at an exponential rate. The brain is elastic and neurons are firing at rates that we can't even imagine. And so we know that if we invest in creating safe, trauma-free environments, not many schools, but places where children can grow and develop their gross motor skills, their language skills, their interaction skills and social emotional skills, we know that we are setting the groundwork for their success in kindergarten, in 3rd grade, as a senior in high school, and what they do post their schooling. And so I think what I want us to think about is not only how do we help students who are currently in our schools who need a lot of help, and I'll say in particular, investments in tutoring for those who have fallen behind during the pandemic and who may still need help catching up. Mm-hmm. But we also need to think about if we were going to do the best by a child who was born today, we wouldn't start thinking about their education at 5 years old. We would start thinking about making sure that their family is supported during that postpartum time with paid family medical leave. We think mm-hmm. about making sure that they have a home visit from a nurse and to see if there's any early identification or other resources that they may need. And we want to make sure that their parents are supported in choosing to go back to work if they choose. and then with childcare that is affordable and doesn't break the bank. And so if we think about the full lifespan of a child, I think that we start thinking out of the box about what we could do to improve that K through 12 piece. There are many ways that we need to support our kids, but I think early interventions and extra attention for those children who shouldn't just be pushed forward and pushed forward into a new grade that need that extra help. I think those are two places where if we did substantial investment of time and care and money, we would see some dramatic changes in those statistics.
So I hear you with the early education, and I think the families play a really important role. And when I think about my time, my mom was always home. My dad always worked, and we had a solid support throughout our education. I have 3 other siblings, and in some cases, I remember my mom thinking that, well, I should have done some other work and maybe not staying home. But then later on, we understood how important for her to be with us throughout those times, because without the family support, probably we wouldn't be able to get to where we are today. Now, but this actually becomes more difficult with the economic challenges, right? So now we are in our central office, we have more than 150 employees, with our clinics probably close to 300 employees. And one of the real life examples that I always see, some of our employees, single moms who are struggling throughout the process, especially if they have more than one kid. And we are trying to find different ways to support them, but it's becoming more and more challenging. And I'm thinking that, can Delaware can we bring Delaware where we were maybe 20, 25 years ago, like when MBNA was, one of the big employers here. DuPont was when they were really big in Wilmington, and other employers. Do you think we can attract big employers to bring them into Delaware, making Delaware more attractive for them?
I think the answer is yes. I also want to touch on too, though, when you said for family supports, right? One of the biggest and most successful programs that we've seen in other states is parents as teachers, right? Parents receiving supports in order to be the best resource for their children at home, if they choose to be, and then also to support grandparents who may be that primary caregiver. So even in a family situation in a home, we want to make sure that we are providing resources to those families so that we can make sure that that child development is not only what the family wants to see, but is something they have the tools that they can kind of supplement what they're doing. And so the answer to talk a little bit about large business, I think it's always going to be a balance. And I think what Delaware has learned is that we have to have a unique pitch. We have to be a different type of bidder than, say, Fairfax, Virginia, or other places. And I think that is both, the more we lean into being our unique economic selves, the better we're going to match with companies. I think there's been, some mismatches in the past. There's been some state resources that have been outlaid, and then companies have chosen to leave kind of when those expire. So I think from my perspective, I have 2 priorities. One is to build long-term sustainable relationships with the larger organizations. And I think that, that is easier said than done, but there needs to be an openness and an expectation if there are going to be, state partnerships in those ways. The other, though, is I think that we have a great capacity to build our small businesses here into medium-sized businesses, our medium-sized businesses into large businesses, and actually, very importantly, and something I've seen in my district, build our micro businesses into small businesses, helping entrepreneurs who are working out of their homes get their first employee or their first brick and mortar shop. And so I think that if we are looking at the full kind of range of economic opportunities for business owners and for employers if we are looking at fostering people who have chosen Delaware already, and we want to help them recruit people for us. I think that is an amazing place to invest. And so obviously, I think you need to look at the full spectrum. But one of my priorities would definitely be to be working closely with those small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in Kent and Sussex County, where there's a tremendous opportunity for growth and for attracting workers to come to our state.
So that's great. Now, with when we come to healthcare and social services, healthcare is one of the biggest issues, not just from the social standpoint, but also from the budget standpoint. So 1/3 of the Delaware budget is for healthcare and social services. Now, from a healthcare provider standpoint, we have about 180 different providers, physicians and providers from different specialties. We do have a surgery center, American Surgery Center in North Wilmington. We are planning to have another one. And one of the challenges that we have is we are a nonprofit. We are not a nonprofit organization. We are a for-profit organization, and we compete with the nonprofit organizations. Now, earlier we spoke about the size of the states, whether or not this is an advantage and disadvantage. In some cases, especially in the healthcare world, we see Delaware as being dominated by one big hospital systems, and we lose a lot of private practices in time. And I'm like firsthand, I'm a witness of this from different clients, different practices that I know. And I see that as a challenge for us. And in some cases, I don't believe that although what we provide and how we provide and who we provide is not different than the nonprofit, we don't have that same support. Like, for example, 1/3 of my patient population is Medicaid, and 20% is about Medicare. So that means half of our population that we provide services are between the federal and state level people. So do you think we can, at some point, because why this is important is because the cost of healthcare is increasing, and if you don't have alternatives, and if you don't have good, viable alternatives, and if you lose those alternatives, then this may become a big monopoly, and then we can lose the leverage on the cost and controlling the cost. Do you think, well, overall, what is your take on healthcare in Delaware?
So my overall take is that I think I have the frustrations that many consumers have when it comes to healthcare. I have, like I said, 2 young children. I've waited a long time to get new doctors, to get appointments. I've waited months for my own healthcare services. I've sought OBGYN care, but the OBGYNs can barely keep up with having to serve women and people who are pregnant and birthing, right? So I think that I am probably experiencing what my constituents are experiencing. And what I have seen in my role as a senator is that coming up with kind of single, like I talked about earlier, kind of single bill solutions is an incredibly challenging way to try to address an incredibly challenging problem. And so I think when we talk about kind of changing our healthcare system, we are going to have to rely a lot on our federal delegation and President Biden to continue to drive the federal policy that will help us do better here in Delaware. But we are going to have to look at our governance and administration of our Department of Health and Social Services, as well as our partnerships throughout the state with healthcare facilities, in order to think, I would say, more broad-based about what we're trying to do. And I think the first thing is we have to agree on what we are solving for, right? There are a lot of constituencies within healthcare. And I think, though, that there are a lot of overlapping issues. So I think if we start maybe talking more about the, I would say, types of changes we'd like to see, and rather than talking about just the constituencies we want to serve better, I think that we could look at some more broad-based changes. We've done great work, I think, with the primary care bill. That too has run into challenges. Everything has to be an iterative process. We have to be willing to go back to the table. We have to be willing to talk about how we can do better the next time. And we have to see the continuation of in-depth policy talks. We can't just look at an issue and say we solved it. We've got to go and keep talking. So that might not be exactly that's a little bit more than just my take, but I think we have to be honest with ourselves that this is not something that we are going to solve with one bill or perhaps one administration. We are going to need sustained work in the area.
So, one of the issues from our side on the healthcare, you mentioned the primary care bill, and I believe it was a successful bill. And then we also worked with Brian Townsend. We met him several times, but it was, I think our timing was a little bit late, and I believe there will be some follow-up to that bill. One of the things that I want to make sure all of our state officials, current ones and the future lieutenant governor also is well aware of the issue is insurance versus third-party administrators. So this is a big issue for healthcare providers. So when we look at our commercial insurances from the practice standpoint, let's say we have 3 big or 4 big insurance companies, but one of them is the major one, maybe almost 85% of the commercial market is by Highmark. So, but in Highmark, only 25% is the actual insured population, which the primary care actually applies to. And I think initially, I don't think maybe we were either, I think we were aware of that, I guess, just because the issue is on the, I think it's the state law or the federal law. I'm not 100%, but one of them is kind of limiting you guys to interfere with the self-funded plans. But self-funded plan, which is managed by the TPA, is an insurance for us because they just use us. Like there's no difference. Like state of Delaware is one of the biggest employers, right? And we have a couple different plans from state of Delaware. When I look at the state of Delaware employee who comes to us as a patient, well, oh, they have Highmark or they have Aetna. We don't say, oh, this is a self-funded plan, so we have to do X, Y, Z, because we have no connection with the employer. So I think we have to fix that. Because when we have a primary care bill, which, Medicare is on its own, and then Medicaid is not included. So it's going to the 25% of the 50% that limits the power of primary care bill, where I think more physicians, more providers can actually understand the impact of that. And I think that's really important.
I think it's a very important point. And I think, people are going to think I'm paying you to make my points here, but like what you're saying is that we have a bill, we're trying to solve a problem, but what we need to realize is there are other pieces of the system that are impeding our progress. And until we look at the full scope of that, we might not see the results that we expected or that we want to see. And being honest about that and going back to the drawing board or being really strong with stakeholders and saying, we all want the same thing. We might need to take or do a different path than we originally thought. To me, when people ask what is leadership, right? It is that ability to be honest, but also to hold yourself accountable and hold your stakeholders accountable. So I'm interested to see where the changes go. And I would also just say, and I'm sure maybe many of people who are watching kind of know everything you're talking about, but I know that a lot of people that I hang out with outside of politics wouldn't know all the acronyms. And I think we kind of have to deconstruct these conversations so that voters understand what we're trying to do. And so that because they can understand the systems as well. Otherwise, we're not going to really have that participation in this dialogue and in this topic in particular.
So, even I did not know some of these terms until 2012, and I'm little bit embarrassed by this, but by that time I was in healthcare for 12 years, and I learned it the hard way in one of the Medicaid meetings as we were I was thinking that we are trying to save money for the insurance company, and the insurance company was upset with me, like, well, by reducing my cost, you are not helping me. And I never understood. I'm like, what do you mean? And then I'm not going to give the name, but I can do it off the record after the live. The medical director says, well, I'm a TPA, 75% of my business is TPA. So then if you reduce the cost, you're not helping me. So I was just having one of those moments where I still didn't understand in the meeting.
Yeah.
So I had to come to my office and do a little bit of research. I'm like, oh my God, like we missed this whole big issue. And I was in this by that time, it was 12 years. Yeah. So I'm like, how did I miss that? So, because if as a healthcare provider, I am not aware of that, how can the regular person, average person would know that? Of course, it's a really important.
And can I just add real quick? Remember, legislators are just regular people as well. And any one day, there may be 20 different topics that are coming at us, from a road and a sidewalk to figuring out primary care in Delaware. And so I think also what we need to build in Delaware and build within our government and outside our government are policy experts, people who can really dig in on these topics and be, I would say, people driven in their results. Because that's what legislators want. That's what the governor wants, right? We want to be responsive to what the people need. And sometimes in these very complex systems, it is hard to call those balls and strikes. So we do need to build out that kind of group around us to help us navigate and do what is best for Delawareans.
No, that's very true. And so one thing that I think we do really well in Delaware is our Medicaid program. Because as United Medical, we provide services to almost 30 different states, and we are familiar with the other Medicaid programs in different states.
Great.
And I would say we probably would be number one, probably best Medicaid for patients and for healthcare providers. And I think that's something that we really need to kind of probably highlight for people. Just go up to like Pennsylvania, and then there's a disaster with the Medicaid program. So you go to other states, it's really not the most desirable plan that anyone wants to participate with. And also it's not good for the patients because they don't have the regular benefits that they should be having. Now, I know you're a lawyer, and I know this question may not be the best question for a lawyer, but one thing with the medical malpractice issue with the providers, with the physicians, this is a big issue. And do you think you would ever support the tort reform, the medical malpractice liability reform ever? And again, I'm not trying to corner you on this one, but I want our providers are asking me to bring these up, and that's one of them. Do you think we would ever have a tort reform in Delaware at some point?
I'm never going to say never, because I don't know what the 50 years down the line has to hold. But what I can tell you, I've been digging into this issue in particular, probably both because I am an attorney and because, like I said, our OBGYN care is really suffering primarily because, well, for a lot of reasons, for rates issues, but an incredibly important piece of it is the high malpractice insurance costs. And so I've been digging into this on behalf of providers to try and understand what could possibly be done from the policy standpoint. And as you know, an insurance market is not one that the hand of government can just put your thumb on the line and change. And what the research that I've been doing, and I have to give all credit to a couple of really top-notch researchers out of the Senate who have been helping me with this, is that we can't necessarily draw that correlation between the tort reform and the lower malpractice. And so what we've been looking at are where have people tried other things? Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're instituting a policy that works, right? There are pros and cons to tort reform, but I don't want to bring the cons into play if they're not going to help me fix the problem that I've identified, right? And so there are different models that have happened in other states. We have done research on some of those models. We recently presented at the Women's Caucus. I am really proud to be a co-chair of the Delaware Legislative Women's Caucus, where we had a conversation about this and set the stage for conversations between attorneys, providers, health insurance folks, MCOs, to talk about, is there a solution in Delaware that will get right to the malpractice issue? And I also have to give great credit to our insurance commissioner's office and everyone who works there, who's also looking at this issue. So I think the answer is looking first at tort reform wouldn't be my first proposal until we figure out what else is on the table, what could we do, and can we get straight to the problem?
I think the reasonableness, right? So like, we don't want to just do one thing and then the result may or may not be what we want, but there may be other negative impacts on the other side. So I actually do follow you on that. Well, one of the interesting thing with the lieutenant governor, and many people either may or may not know, but you're not running on a ticket, right? You're on your own, so you're not running with the governor.
That's
so
right.
It's kind of like one of those. Can you have like a governor from a different party and then
you can. It's happened before. Yeah, in Delaware, it's happened before.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the best, honestly, because I don't think we need the checks and balance in that level at that point in that kind of like scale. Like, you don't want to actually make it difficult to make decisions, and you have to have someone who you can work with. Yeah. But it's still an interesting one. So you don't know who your governor is going to be.
That's right.
Now, do you see challenges with that because you don't know who you are going to work with?
I personally don't see challenges with that, but I think that's probably just because, like I said, in my career, my job has been to pick up a new case every week or every month, get to know the client, get to know the parties, get to know my co-counsel. And I think I have built some of my successes over being able to sit down and talk with people to get to know them, but also understand how they work and how I can best support their goals. And I think that's something the lieutenant governor has to do in Delaware. I agree with you. It would be very difficult to have different parties in those seats, because really the lieutenant governor, if you think about it, is the only member of the cabinet who also answers to the voters. And so that voice, I think, is incredibly important for the governor. And I think that the governor needs to be able to trust and rely on the work of the lieutenant governor. I also think that lieutenant governor, while has a small enumerated duties, has a great opportunity to be a post that we use to get to work on behalf of Delaware citizens. I mean, currently with the opioid fund distribution that's going on, the Behavioral Health Consortium, if I were lieutenant governor, I would hope to have a special emphasis on education and a focus on early education and doing some more long-term work in that spot. But it is really a unique privilege to be in a position where you have the flexibility in partnership with the governor and the cabinet to really design how you can best contribute. And it is that opportunity that I see as an opportunity. I really do. And I think that we need to remember that every position in our government needs someone who is there on behalf of our citizens every day, who will come to everything enthusiastically and with a frame to what's best for Delaware. And so, I do think that I'd be able to build some good partnerships. And I hope that whoever is governor feels the same way about me.
Well, I'm sure they will. Now, this is a really important position. As you are overseeing the Senate, right? So as a lieutenant governor,
yes.
And if something forbid happens to the governor, you will be the succession to the governor, chairing the board of pardons and advocacy and public engagement, and so many other important responsibilities that this position has. And I believe you would be a great lieutenant governor. And thank you for joining us, and I wish you the best for the rest of your campaign. Our goal for this program, this channel, is for this year, we have 4 or 5 more state officials or who are the candidates who are running. They will be part of it. We'll probably finish with Lisa Rochester in December. Next week, We have turned that Navarro, Sherry Walker, I believe 1027, Sarah McBride on November 3rd, and Bethany Hall and Lisa Rochester. And then in 2024, we want to go back and then just have a second cycle, and hopefully we would like to see you again.
That sounds great.
This was a great conversation.
I really appreciate it. This was fantastic to talk about the issues. As if you might not be able to tell, I love talking about the issues.
I mean, I learned a lot about you, and I think understanding what you want to do with Delaware and where you want to take us. I think there are a lot of good points that you made, and we wish you the best. And then we'll see you soon.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Sean Donegan, did you put yourself in the waiting room? Okay, so here you are. So what did you think about her?
I think she's very well spoken, and that was a very solid session we had. You know, when we have these guests, we don't ever really give them a heads up on what here, you know, we're going to ask you X, Y, Z. It's kind of just that natural dialogue, and being able to, you know, have such constructed responses on the fly. It's obviously a good sign, and I think she did have a lot of good points that she'd make and reference to multiple issues that we brought up. So thought it went well.
I think she's going to do very well. So, and we always appreciate them joining us and sharing what they want to do in the future. Now, so we have an unfortunate topic that we have to cover today. We had a really good topic, good guest, and everything was great. But in the real world, life is not so great, unfortunately. And we want to talk about Israel and Palestine conflict. Now, we process this to see what would be the best way to approach this issue. And our main goal from day one is to keep an independent position and be objective. So while we are covering this, can we maintain our objectiveness is one of our main focus. And the answer is yes, we can keep and maintain our objectiveness. And what separates maybe you and I from the rest, and I'm just talking in general terms, because of these events, we have to read a little bit more than average people, and we have to do a little bit more research than average people, and we have to kind of keep ourselves up to date with the current events.
Definitely.
Now, our channel focused on mainly three issues. So the healthcare would be the main focus. With that, U.S. economy and global affairs. Now, global affairs is one of those where many people have their own opinion whether or not we should be discussing those. But you and I, we know that these are important things because it's affecting our day-to-day living here in the United States. So what's happening outside of the United States, outside of our borders, do have direct impact. Now, we start covering the global affairs with Tigray in 2020, and then we included other part of Africa with the ongoing conflict with neighbors in Africa and how Europe has its own dominance. Then Ukraine actually started. It was January 2022, right?
February, yeah.
February, yeah. I mean, in the beginning of 2022. So it's 18 months almost. So then we had a little bit Taiwan issue, and then we had stuff in South America happen, and now there's one kind of like sleeping. I want to say sleeping beauty, but it's not sleeping beauty, but the Middle East and Israel and Palestine issue. And this is a huge problem, which is going to become probably bigger than what it is today. Now, when we actually go through these issues. Do we have our current situation, ideal state one here? So you can keep going and I'll be back.
Yeah, so as you're mentioning, the fact that we obviously with this weekly session, we are staying up to date on these events, regardless if, say, a big upcoming sub event happens. So, like you're saying, we've tracked the global conflicts over months now, years, and some of the times it'll be like dormant, where there's still tension, but nothing's erupted most recently. So unless something super big happens, the news might not be touching on it. So I think that's what we're seeing with the issue here on the Palestine-Israel conflict, where the most latest significant sub event in this ongoing conflict that dates back to, I guess, the 1940s, late 40s maybe. That it just seems anytime that a new significant eruption on the tension, then all of a sudden the news will kind of get focused on it, and then once that little flare up maybe plays itself out, then they seem to disregard it again, going back to other things that may be drawing their attention.
And one of the things that when we are approaching these issues, my famous current situation ideal state chart, which is playing on the video right now. So this is an important one, and I always tell people you can use this for everything in life. Big, small issues doesn't matter, but you just need to really understand what current situation is. Ideal state is where you want to be, and the barriers. So we use this for healthcare related issues. We use this for business. We use this for personal issues. But this is kind of like the way that we look at it. So that what's the current situation, where we want to be, my ideal state, and the barriers. So the barriers is where we need to focus on and see if we can actually, improve, remove some of those barriers, and then make it easier to get to the ideal state. Now, the issue with Israel and Palestine is there are a couple of things that we need to understand. So one is Hamas. So who Hamas is and what they do. The other issue, separate item, is Gaza. Like we need to understand what this place is. What's really happening, and then we actually can look into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So Hamas is an organization. So this is in I think in the 80s they started, and their main goal was to support those people who were on the Palestinian side with the social services and helping them with the militant resistance against Israeli forces. Now, this was kind of like a reaction to what the people were going through at that time. So this was a reaction to that. So these people started with maybe good intentions that time, and their goal was to support the Palestine. So they don't have a state, independent state. So they were probably, as maybe they started with the good intentions, so it didn't turn out to be so great at the end of the day. So now it has the military part of it, it has the political part of it. Now, one thing that I don't like in the United States, that we do everything on the opposite side, opposition, is we kind of name them differently, we label them differently. Like, for example, we call Putin a dictator. Well, he's not a dictator, he came there with an election. Just because we don't get along with him doesn't mean that he's a dictator. So dictatorship is if you don't have elections, then that's a dictatorship. Like, for example, the monarch that we have in Great Britain is a dictatorship as a monarch because you cannot be elected for that position. I'm not talking about their system from the political side, but they do have a king, or they did used to have a queen. Their prime minister has to report to. So we're not talking about that. So we need to kind of stop doing those bad habits of just because they don't look like us or they don't behave like us, we have to kind of call them something different than who we are, how we actually call our people. Like these are people who are going after their rights. And we really need to understand where they're coming from and have a good situational awareness of the problem. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that we have to stop doing. So we cannot call just countries or organizations like terrorist groups just because they go against us. Mm-hmm. But that's a different group. So they just fight with us. We don't call Cuba a terrorist country, right? So it's a country. It's just opposition. Just because they have a different approach and perspective on issues doesn't mean that we are going to call them with different terms and labels. Mm-hmm. So Gaza is a place, this is one of the most heavily dense places in the world. Mm-hmm. 2 million people. This is like an open prison. Mm-hmm. 2 million people live in this region for almost 20 years now, right? So they have zero access. They're kind of walled in, fenced in.
Yeah,
these fences are huge. There are control points. Everything that they get is controlled. They have to go through the checkpoints. And they've been living in that for more than 20 years, right? So there's a blockade by Israel, and they are in an active war for a long time. So this never stopped. They never had a peace. Yeah. In fact, there's a huge humanitarian crisis for Gaza for a long time, but this was become more clear in the last maybe 10 years, where they don't have access to like basic human needs like the water, electricity, and I'm not talking about for today. I'm talking about all this time. So they have limited access. So once we have these Hamas and Gaza, the people who are going to make comments, they should really read these and understand them first. So, okay, so I'm going to go into this and then just say, okay, this is how I want to actually have a view on this issue. You have to really do your homework. One of the disturbing tweet that I saw this morning from one of the billionaires, and I understand he's a Jewish guy, Bill Ackman, and he says he's giving this analogy, and we both of us we don't approve any of these actions. We are against what Hamas did, or we are against what Israel is doing. So we have an independent point, right?
Yeah. Okay. We both agree, peace. Yeah,
and we are not saying we are not supporting one or the other side, but we just want to have a good objective view and see, for example, what this guy is saying is. So, for context on this, ask yourself if the U.S. would respond if Mexicans terrorists invade Texas and brutally killed 1,200 people. Blah blah. Well, that's different. And this guy is a very smart guy. I've been following him for a long time. But when I saw this, I can kind of see he's clearly trying to influence people who have no idea about this issue, no background on this issue. So, and I did respond to him saying that, look, I mean, this is not the same thing. So yes, if Mexico just do something today, unexpected, like we don't have a historical war, like we don't have any ongoing conflict with them. So then, yes, we would answer them in a different way. But this is the losing side. The underdog is the other side, not Israel. Israel is the one who framed these people and try to make these people live in these limited regions, and the war never stopped. So now the level of this war, intensity of this war, who kills who, those are all different topics. But what's been happening is we have to go to the root cause analysis. this issue. The issue is not that simple. So that's why I was giving this current situation an ideal state, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be easy with our tool that we use, but that's not.
Yeah, I think as you're mentioning, it's a lot more complex than it's kind of what I touched on earlier, where sometimes, like especially if this conflict has been going on, for decades now, you're not getting a play-by-play on every little event that happens during that. Like I said, you might just be getting like this highlight reel, if you will, of just these big significant things, and then people are only formulating maybe their opinions or stances based on what this partial that's available to them. So I think, like you're saying, it's much more complex that you have to understand. I think both sides, like you're saying, to have the objective approach where we're just saying, here's what this side wants, the other side wants, and why there actually is that conflict. And obviously the US has been involved, or tried to have been involved, for decades now too, looking all the way back in previous presidencies and their attempts of peace talks and what approaches or policies they at least proposed. And obviously, if you're looking at what happened just a week ago, it's not resolved yet, and there hasn't really been a successful resolution to this. And I think with any issue, regardless of what how passionate someone is about it or whatever, if it just is ongoing, the more time it lasts, the more likely it's going to spiral out of control, but in like a more catastrophic manner, as opposed to, if it was going on for a few years and then you figure it out, boom, it was done. But something that's been going on over generations, I think, is a lot more complex. And like I said, regardless what side you're on, each one obviously feels that they are in the wrong and that they're not the victim, but that their cause or what's driving them is more important than the other ones, and they have a right to this. And I think obviously with this the particular conflict, it's that the right to their holy land, and they're bringing in the religion. Obviously, it's more than just
government. Isn't that the craziest thing ever? So God promised me this region, so promised land. So
they both feel entitled to that particular.
Well, but one side is saying that no, God gave me this, so you have to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's like, if you think about it, we go to Mexico and then just say about God told us that this is ours now, so you have to move.
So the tricky thing there too is when you're looking at countries versus religions, like in the US, there's probably hundreds of religions that are practiced by people. So for having one nation or group identifies justifying their military action based on just the religion of maybe the majority of the people in their region, like that's its own issue right there. Whereas imagine if you're saying in the US, like if you picked out like this particular religion, so that's why the US is now invading it, like that has nothing to do where they're just kind of using that as like I guess like overlapping justification, if you will.
So now, the issue from the root cause analysis standpoint, this issue goes back to like 1900s, like 1914, 1915. Yeah. So the British is the one, the evil, actually is the British government at that time, the monarch. So they promise different group of people in Middle East the idea of nationalism, and then say, well, you are Palestinian, so you should be having your own state. You are Iraqi, you should have your own. You are Syrian, you should have. They were all under Ottoman Empire for 400 years, and never had these issues. Never had any of these types of problems. They lived together without any problems. But when British actually promised Israel to go to Middle East. And then actually they have to act on it, and then they promised the independency of Palestine at the same time. So all of a sudden, so you one day you wake up and then people are just coming to your home and then taking your home, your land, your everything that you have, and saying that, well, this is what promised to us, so you have to go. Well, if you can't go, then you have to live in this little area that I'm going to kind of throw for you. And then it's almost like cornering a cat. The cat is going to attack you if you corner a cat, right? So they will attack you. So now this partition plan didn't work. We know that in 1948, the war where Israel got more. Every time they got more, every time they got more. This time they're going to wipe out 2 million people.
Mm.
Now, one really important thing when we were trying to prep for this, and again, because we have this on a weekly basis, so we have to read what's happening in these different regions. The evil Netanyahu, his people didn't agree with him, and there were big, very loud, powerful unrest demonstration for the last 7 months.
Back in the summer.
But, well, it was up to September, so it was still happening. So, and now, as he was losing his power, and he was dealing with the corruption cases, so he's trying to change the Supreme Court system where he can actually control everything from one place.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if he's benefiting from this fully. Like all of a sudden there's this attack, and then now, like if this just happened first time, oh, let's go and just wipe out this, and then we are one united Israel now. Well, until 2 weeks ago, more than half of his people were protesting and demonstrating against him.
Mm.
Right? So
Interesting.
I can't help but wonder if there's some connection between what's happening, what happened, and what's going to happen. So then he's going to secure his position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think, you always say the power to the people, and at the end of the day, they are responsible for who you elect. And like you're saying, maybe they were, there was the unrest because they weren't happy with how he was handling certain things. And I think it was when he fired the defense.
Mm-hmm. So he was actually just, he was using a lot of force on his own people. I think, right? So when you're going through those things, like just from the official records, there are hundreds of people were injured. So you can't just say that, oh, this many people were injured from this. Well, if he was doing it because they didn't agree with him from his own people, this is his own people disagreeing with him, and he injured more than 1,000 people. So then he didn't wipe out half of the Israel at that time, right? So we know that there are different games with this, and I think this issue is going to escalate. So I put these 3 guys on the screen, and I think these 3 guys are going to be responsible for the Third World War in the current days that we live in. So now started with Tigray, like the guy had so much damage with the Nobel Peace Prize endorsements on him. And then there's this charlatan Zelensky. He was nobody. Now he's like he's acting like a big hero. He was no one. He was nobody. And there's Netanyahu. According to Trump, just yesterday, Trump was saying that he didn't support us when we were fighting ISIS. Just last 2 years ago, he didn't support U.S. forces. And now, because of these people, we are being pulled into these big conflicts. And I'm just worried where the United States would be with all these different conflicts, because we are going to pay, just we discussed the economy, right? So we are already paying twice more for the same mortgage that we had. So we didn't discuss the issue of like the business mortgage, right? So that doubled more, it actually went 2.5 times, 2.5 times. So when we have all these issues, now they are trying to kind of paint this, picture of, oh, Israel is being attacked. That's not the case. So this is an ongoing conflict that they had for years, and Israel is the heavy-handed side on this. Now, we are not saying that the other side is right, but we are also not saying that the other side is wrong. Yeah, they are in a war. So, and our Nikki, what's her last name? Haley. She goes, just finish them. She tells Netanyahu, finish them. What do you mean by finishing them? Finishing who? Human being?
I think
so. Another genocide?
I think she's referring to just the extremists.
But how can you separate them? We're in the same room. Who's the extremists? You and I.
Well, I know, yeah, and the fact that they're mixing with the civilians, that's why it's very
But I mean,
delicate on how they respond, but
yeah,
I think just to find out though, one other thing is, looking at the election, I think it was in 2006, 2008, in Palestine, they did shift from, the Fatah, if I'm pronouncing it right, Fatah, and then
Close
to the Hamas. So like, again, regardless of what country and whatever, I think just when it comes to people, you do have to be aware of like when you elect certain groups or people, what consequences may come with having them in power, you know, whether it's like you're saying, look at the economy now versus 4 years ago and what changes happened just in that one span. Like it's because the decisions made of people who are supposed to be representing the people. I guess you should just be delicate on who, what is their interest, and do they have the best interest in you at the end of the day.
but people and countries have to be very delicate when we are processing this. That's all we are telling people. There are a lot of social media influencers. Don't believe what you see. Just do your own research. They talk about this baby, the head being cut off. That was not true. So the White House has to explain that again, saying that no, we haven't seen that. But then all of a sudden, social media, you know, like this is one of our issues. Social media is so powerful. The fake news can go so fast, so you can't even fix it in a timely manner.
Yeah, people can act on it before you have.
Yeah. So, so I think one of the best approaches that I see is President Erdogan, the Turkish president, who is. You would think that from a Muslim country standpoint, they would be just jumping on the Hamas side, but he's not.
Sure. But
he's not also supporting the other side. He's saying that, look, we have to work this out together. So you can't just, this is not going to end if you don't stop fighting, right? But what I see is some countries, they're like, oh, let's just go and wipe them out. The other countries are saying that, oh, we are going to support you under the table, like Iran and Egypt, and like you continue your fight. But those two approaches are the worst approaches probably for humanity, because there are 2-3 million people who are going to be wiped out from the earth. Mm-hmm. So then Erdogan's approach, just like he was right on Russia and Ukraine conflict. So that being a neighbor for both countries and then saying that, no, I'm going to be, make sure that I'm the mediator here. So I'm not going to be siding with one, because no one is right. No one is fully 100% right. So this is one of those issues that I see American public maybe not understanding the issue, because again, we don't read a lot. Unfortunately, we just see a headline and then just go with that. And that's why we have to be very careful in the next several weeks to make sure that what you see is not what's happening. So please do your research, question it, read and research, and then you'll see a better answer. And, you know, again, what we can say here is kind of limited because we are not decision makers, but we maybe can voice out what public is feeling, and not being able to have one side being 100% right is a difficult challenge. But I'm sure with the good, reasonable approach, we can overcome this. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, today was our longest session, probably. That's because we don't have Bariatric Friday. So Dr. Erkan is traveling today. So we'll be back with Dr. Erkan and Bariatric Friday next week. And we have our insurance commissioner, Trinidad Navarro. Yeah. He's going to join us next week. And until then, please be safe, stay safe, and have a great weekend.